year, as we did last, that we have about a third of the members of the course are joining us online. For those online participants, we will generally mute you for a good deal of the time because our experience is that there's just enough background noise that it's a problem. If you can't hear well what's happening, which has not been a problem in the past, but if that is an issue, please email Jean Lambert, who is Jean L, Jeanl at uab.edu, or me, dchaplin at uab.edu, and we will do what we can to fix the problem. One thing this means is that anybody from the group on hand here at Birmingham who is going to make a comment needs to use one of these microphones. So you'll note that the microphone isn't helping those of us here to hear any better, but it is allowing the people online to hear the proceedings. So I'll walk around the room with the microphone if somebody wants to raise a question or make a comment. So please have a little patience to make that happen so we can all participate in the activity. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing the program. I think most of you have some idea what you've gotten yourself into here, but just to some of the ground rules for this course. We provide a very nice piece of paper that's a certificate of completion, which actually can be useful in your CV and with your division department directors and chairs. And that's given to anybody who completes 80% of the activities. If we get into the last third of the course and people are looking at risk of not making it to 80%, Jean will send you some messages to let you know that you need to make up. If you miss a session that you're really interested in and couldn't attend, all of the sessions are recorded and will be posted online, sometimes with a lag of a little more than a week, but you can take those sessions on your own time over the web, and we provide a short quiz on each of those sessions for you to send in to document that you listened to the session. One of the really high points, I think, of the course is a chance for each of the participants here in Birmingham to sit in on an IRB session. They are Wednesdays from 9 a.m. to noon, and starting after we have the introductory IRB discussion by Carrie Oliver, who's one of the associate directors of the IRB, you'll have had a chance to sign up, and two participants per week will leave the class at 9 o'clock. The sessions are in the administration building just across the street on 20th, between 7th and 8th Avenues. And so you'll miss the last half of that class session here, but have that IRB experience. So as we get closer to that time, we'll ask you to sign up, and you'll need to bring your calendars in order to be able to do that, and we'll give you some warning about that. The major assignment for the course is to write a scientific abstract on the work that you either are currently doing or that you plan to do, and then we'll have one session where there's an opportunity to do some critiquing of abstracts. This is a very supportive environment. One of the things we want people to learn is how to provide effective collegial feedback to each other. So we'll spend some time doing that. And then there will be several sessions devoted to individuals giving a 12 to 15-minute oral presentation of their research projects, again, with the peers and a group of mentors available to give feedback at that session. And that'll happen during June, and then the program ends with a mock study section, which we're going to poll you as a group to get your input on which kind of a grant you would most like to hear discussed. We'll use a real grant that is from a UAB participant. That was, usually we have one that has not succeeded in its first submission, so you can see what the critique was like during the first submission, what the participants or the investigators did to respond to the study section's concerns, and then how the grant fared on its resubmission. And all of these grants are ones that ultimately were funded with high priority scores. And that'll be on June 26th, and we'll probably meet in the School of Public Health for that session. But otherwise, all the sessions will happen here at the PCAMS building. Just really briefly, we'll hand out the detailed course agenda later this week. We're finalizing just a couple of details for the schedule, but there will be modules which are generally 3 to 5 weeks long on clinical trials, on research ethics. There's a substantial focus on epidemiology and biostatistics. We won't turn you all into card-carrying biostatisticians, but we'll give you the vocabulary to interact with statisticians effectively and a sense, enough information for you to understand really the most effective ways to integrate biostatistical issues into your research plans. Then there will be a considerable section on research project development, which will include how teams work, what you should be thinking about in assembling your own research teams. We'll give you presentations from faculty from the medical library on how to most effectively use library resources. We'll have the session discussing scientific abstracts, and then an interesting session on the innovation core, a very interesting approach to helping you to define the best way to develop your own research program so that it is of real interest to the community that you intend as its audience. There'll be a final module on outcomes research and personalized medicine, and then the research presentations and mock study section. So are there any questions at this point about what's going to happen and what your roles are? We've invited mentors to come this morning, partly to have you recognize what this is all about. I also really want to highlight that along the way, we will give short discussions of the mentor-mentee relationship, and I view this as really a crucial aspect of your own career development, of how you make the most effective use of your mentors. For mentors, I think it's crucial for you to understand how to avoid pitfalls in the relationship to make it run as smoothly as possible so that both parts of the mentor-mentee team get the most out of the relationship. I think all of us with gray hair recognize that our mentoring experiences are what really are the memorable aspects of our careers and what make us the most satisfied with having chosen academic pursuits as our career. And so I encourage you to be intentional in developing your mentor-mentee relationship, and we'll talk about that a little more as the course evolves. Just related to that, there are several things that are not explicitly part of this course that I want to draw your attention to. One is there's a case discussions in mentoring series that actually starts today. It's 8 pretty much freestanding sessions that address different aspects of the mentor-mentee relationship, and through case discussions. It's really a educate peer on how to make the most out of your mentor-mentee relationship. It's intended both for mentors and for mentees. If you're a mentor wannabe or expect to be soon, I really encourage you to participate. It's every Wednesday from 11 to 12. This series will be in the Shelby building. You can drop in. It's nice if you sign up online ahead of time through the CCTS website so that we can make sure there's enough paperwork available for everyone, but you're welcome just to come in. You don't need to come to all the sessions to get anything out of it. You can come to individual ones. It'll be repeated probably 3 or 4 weeks after this 8-week session completes, so anything that you miss, you can catch up to later. We anticipate having a bioethics forum that'll be a chance to really explore some of the issues that will have been discussed in the ethics module here in more detail, specifically around the issue of genomic research in diverse populations. And we'll provide more information as we get close to that. I want to call your attention to a really great opportunity if you're getting close to presenting your own research. The Southern Society for Clinical Investigation holds its meeting, I think, pretty much every year in New Orleans. It'll be in February 20th, February 22nd, roughly that period of time. And the Training Academy here at the CTCS will be holding a day-and-a-half training Academy Symposium immediately prior to the SSCI meeting. So if you're going to go to SSCI to present your work, I encourage you to look into that as an extra day add-on to have an in-depth day-and-a-half of career development activities that can be really helpful for your careers. And then the last thing I want to point out is we partner with the graduate school, the postdoc association, and the provost office to hold a mentoring week, which is April 1st to 5th. It's really 1 to 2 hours each day of the week, going through the April 1st to April 5th, discussing different aspects of mentoring. One of the highlights for me always is we have an interactive theater group who comes to provide an example of aspects of the mentor-mentee relationship that are particularly insightful and give you a chance to be involved in the discussion of something that's going on stage. So we'll provide you with reminders about these as we come along, and we hope you'll take advantage of those as the semester evolves. Okay, so now I'm going to turn the podium over to Dr. Bob Kimberly. Dr. Kimberly is the PI of CTSA. He is the Senior Associate Dean for Translational Science here at UAB, and he's going to provide an introduction to the spectrum of translational research and what we hope you'll get out of thinking about how to evolve your own skills as translational thinkers so that you'll be best prepared to make the best decisions in your research careers. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, David. So there is a seat up front, if you'd like.
Thank you.
And if you need fortification for a front row seat, there's coffee and a breakfast. Okay. So welcome, guys. I want to take just a few minutes this morning to talk a little bit about what we're doing within the CCTS. But to make sure that I don't forget, one of the things we're going to talk about is the paper that I'm going to ask you to talk about is the paper that you'd like to publish. So can I start with a question? Who here doesn't want to ever publish a paper? Okay. Have you had any experience talking with editors of journals about what they're looking for in papers and how they're reviewed? Has anyone talked to an editor? Okay, 1 or 2 or maybe 3, 5. Are you aware of what's happening at 4 o'clock this afternoon? Okay, at least a few of you are aware. We've got 6 journal editors who are going to be here in this room at 4 o'clock. The breakfast sandwiches will be done. It's going to be 4 o'clock, so it's probably going to be both food and drink. It's oriented a little bit more toward adult attendees. But please come. This is the chance to pick their brain. That's not to say that each one of them has the perfect solution to every question, but I think it's useful to just learn about how they think, how they orchestrate their reviewers, and the papers that are being reviewed. This afternoon, 4 o'clock. Okay. So again, welcome. There are 42 of us that are scheduled, that have registered for this course this year. There were 43 of us last year. This is fantastic. We had originally set a cap of about mid-30s just to make it manageable in terms of groups, but there's been so much interest both within Birmingham and across the partner network of the CCTS that this is the 2nd year we're running it both face-to-face and virtually simultaneously. That's part of the reason, as David pointed out, that we're recording all the sessions and we're posting them online so that, of course, you'll be at every one. I'm sure that will be the case. But because some of them will be so fantastic, you'll want to go back again and again, and you'll be able to do that online. 5 institutions from across the Deep South, 31 different divisions and departments, and at least 15 disciplines. Once we got above 10, we said, we've made the point, this is really a very interdisciplinary group. You will find in our discussions that at times that will be the richness of our discussions, the different perspectives. Frankly, you also find sometimes that's going to be a challenge because we're going to be coming and talking in different ways. One of our hopes is this experience over the spring is going to be able to help us all figure out how we can best work together to create opportunities that might otherwise not be there. So what are the goals for today? I've listed a couple. David's already given you an introduction to what is translational science. Well, we could either be very succinct, which will be the strategy I'm going to take, or we could spend days talking about that. In fact, we will be talking the entire course about what is translational science and what is translational thinking. There are a couple of thoughts that David and I have shared that might be useful for you to be thinking about, not just today, but throughout the course of these sessions. Thinking about role models in translational science. I have 1 or 2 in mind. But I'd like to let you know we've actually decided to approach this question in a more formal way, and we're working with the School of Education here to see if we can get them to work with us to understand what's the phenotype of really successful translational scientists. Can we unpack that, figure out how to nurture that in all of us? So that might be something you'll be hearing as a thread throughout the next couple of months, how we're working together with the School of Education. And then we'll talk a little bit about opportunities and challenges for translational science. And that really comes down to what's the mission of the CCTS. So I'm going to start, as David suggested, by asking all of us to give our name, our institutional affiliation, and role. Mentors are included. Your discipline, the reasons for joining, and the paper you'd love to publish. And this is going to tie into this afternoon's editing session. So David has the microphone. Is there anything you want to add?
So just to let the people who are joining us online know that at the moment, I believe you're all muted. My understanding is that you can unmute yourself. We're going to ask you to introduce yourselves last, and we'll call on you by name to try to make sure that we manage this in a reasonable way. And I'm going to start at the back of the room to begin with, so if you can just provide the information.
Thank you. My name is Corey Lofton. I'm from UAB. I come from the School of Nursing. The reason that I joined this course is just to become more familiar with the different types of research and work in a multidisciplinary environment. And the paper that I would like to publish would be Sleep Quality on Fatigability in Adult Patients with Multiple Sclerosis.
Okay, it sounds like an abstract that you're going to be presenting toward the end of the course.
My name is Bailey Hendricks. I am at the UAB School of Nursing. Reasons for joining this course, it's to learn different research strategies like grant writing, IRB approval, all those types of things. And then a paper that I'd like to publish is related to psychosocial effects of caregiving on children of cancer patients.
Good morning. My name is Karine Ayer. I am a breast surgery fellow, and the reason for joining this course is because part of my practice will involve, with breast surgery, a lot of research, and one of the things that I'm looking to work on is post-mastectomy pain management with preoperative pain blocks.
I'm Suzy Davies. I am in the Department of Health Behavior in the School of Public Health, and I am Tamika Smith's mentor. and I'm not sure what paper she's going to publish, but I think it has to do with our HIV prevention, social media intervention for at-risk African Americans.
Okay, and I'll just add that mentors can take the choice of either transferring their own thinking to their mentees, what they want to publish, but they can also talk about the paper they've been wanting to publish their whole lives and haven't yet.
My name is Veronica Donato. I am from UAB Biology Department. I am a basic researcher, and I would like to learn more in translational and clinical sciences. My paper will be about how probiotic can help children with spinal muscular atrophy, type 1 and type 2.
I'm Marty Rice. I am a professor at the School of Nursing, and I'm here with my mentee. I think this is a great opportunity for everybody, and I'm learning a lot, even as a mentor. And I particularly was impressed that Tamika wanted to participate in this course. Paper that I would like to continue to publish in is with my research with preschool children and blood pressure.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Tamika Rogers. I'm from UAB in the School of Nursing. The reason I joined this course is to learn more about clinical and translational science and also how to work within a multidisciplinary team. And the paper I would like to publish would be on the relationship between sleep and perceived stress on pediatric obesity and blood pressure.
I am Tamika Smith. I am from UAB in the School of Public Health. The reason for joining this course is I really wanted to get an in-depth understanding in all the mechanics of translational science. And just as my mentor stated, the paper, well, there are several papers we would like to publish on our current work, which is, as she said, HIV, entertainment, education, intervention. One that comes to mind particularly is condom use self-efficacy among African-American female women.
I'm Nicole Bentley in the Department of Neurosurgery and here at UAB. And I joined this course because I wanted to be a better surgeon scientist in translational research. And the paper that I'd love to publish would be on the role of the prefrontal cortex in non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease.
Thank you.
Daniel Smith, School of Health Professions, Department of Nutrition Sciences here at UAB. I'm a mentor for Thomas Hoover. Academic discipline is physiology, metabolism related to obesity, and the paper will be related to spinal cord injury and its impact on brain adipose tissue function in adult humans.
Good. Thanks very much.
I'm Ben Jones. I'm at the Department of Neurology here at UAB. I'm a fellow in neuroimmunology and multiple sclerosis. The reasons for joining this course is I'm staying here on faculty starting in July, so I need to work on finding a way to make myself useful in the future. And the paper that I would like to publish would be looking at the role that inflammation plays in cognitive decline in MS and seeing if there are ways that we can use that to model normal cognitive aging in the healthy individual.
Good morning. I'm Mina Labas. I'm a neuro-oncology fellow. The reason for joining the course, I want to have in-depth training in clinical trials design. And the paper that I would love to publish is targeted therapy in glioblastoma and have a new approach of treating brain tumors. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Samson Abuli-Sowell, and I'm a postdoc at the Department of Ophthalmology here at UAB. The reason why I joined this program is to learn more about clinical and translational research and also to learn about the IRB processes. The paper that I would like to publish is on strategies to detect early glaucoma progression.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kweku Asare from the School of Optometry, UAB. I'm in the Vision Science PhD program. The reason why I joined this program is to be well-versed in clinical and translational research. I would like to publish on the role of glycoprotein in dry eye disease inflammation.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rachael Schemes. I'm one of the third-year emergency medicine residents at UAB. Next year, I'm going to start a 2-year research fellowship in conjunction with the Department of Emergency Medicine and the MSPH of Clinical and Translational Research through the Public Health and Epidemiology Department. Reason for joining this course is it's part of the master's program. I'm just trying to get a head start on it before starting in July. My research interests lie more in palliative and geriatrics, in emergency medicine. My mentor really focuses on shared decision making and decision aids in the emergency department, along with some infectious disease.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lynn Reset. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Ophthalmology here at UAB, and I'll be serving as Samson's mentor. And together we have several papers in the work right now that focus on developing methods to identify glaucoma progression as early as possible.
Okay, I've decided it's unfair to keep our online people uninvolved for this long, so we'll start with a couple of the online participants. So,
Tariq is unmuted.
Tariq Anani, we've unmuted you, so could you please give your name, institution, and academic discipline and reasons for the course?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Okay, let's say Catilia Ware.
Okay.
If you want to run this, fine.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay, so Catilia Ware?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sorry, we unmuted Caitlin McGinnis.
Hi, can you hear me?
She's talking.
Okay. We're having an audio problem, so we'll need to work on this before our next session. I'm not sure. So we'll come back to the online people and work on this in a couple of minutes.
So for all that are coming in virtually, guys, you are going to be a very active part of this, so don't despair because we're going to go off and get a technical consult. I think it's already underway. I know some of you have been unmuted. Sorry it didn't work. So could I make a suggestion? As we continue to go around the room, it would be great to have a lot of time to talk about the projects, but maybe if we could think about a précis that is a smidge shorter, that would actually allow us to finish all of the participants during the 2 hours that we have. So Alan.
Hi, I'm Alan Percy. I'm a child neurologist in the Department of Pediatrics. And I'm Anitha Anand's mentor. I've been working with rare neurologic developmental disabilities, and we're hoping to present a paper. Ultimately, I would like to on the cure.
Thank you.
My name is Amita Anand, and I am a pediatric neurologist in the Department of Pediatrics, junior faculty. And the reasons for joining this course is that I've been primarily very clinically trained and have not really had formal research training. And I'm thrilled to get to work with Ellen with Rett syndrome and Rett syndrome research.
Thank you.
I'm Jessica Schmidt. I'm one of the second-year PD Endo Fellows at UAB and Children's of Alabama. Wanted to take this course to get some more experience with research design and biostatistics. And the paper I'd love to publish is Numeracy Skills and Effects on Diabetes Self-Management in Type 1 Adolescents with Diabetes.
Good, thanks.
I'm Khalid Mahmoud from Department of Interventional Radiology. The reason of joining this program is to conduct clinical and transitional research. The paper I would like to publish is talking about the predictive score of treating patients with renal cell carcinoma by interventional radiology modalities. And the score is talking about the safety of these interventions.
My name is Thomas Hoover. I'm a second-year pre-doc in the Nutrition Sciences Department, and My reason for joining the course is I've got a lot to learn about the research process, so this is a good opportunity.
So welcome.
Hi, my name is Kayleen Lavin. I'm a second-year postdoc here. I'm associated with the Center for Exercise Medicine, and I'm in this course to learn more about the design and management of clinical trials and the analysis of data, of course, that comes from that. The paper I'm currently working on is looking at RNA sequencing and skeletal muscle from patients with Parkinson's disease, so that's the one I'd like to publish next.
Hi, my name's Jody Dion. I'm an assistant professor in the Division of Infectious Disease. I'm taking this class because it's a requirement for the MS-PH degree that's part of my K-23. And I'm that project.
Privilege.
Yes, I did want to make it sound that way. And my project is related to preventing malaria and STIs in women with HIV and cancer.
Hi, I'm Mary Latimer. I'm also here at UAB in the Department of Medicine, the Division of Cardiovascular Disease. And I joined this course to learn more about the translational kind of science process, and I would love to publish another paper, but I'm only 6 months into my postdoc, so I'll leave it there.
Hi, I'm Aaron Rogers. I just recently graduated with my PhD from UAB and then moved to a postdoc in the School of Medicine. Right now I'm working on basically cardiovascular disease, and the next paper I'd like to publish is the effect of mechanical forces on the immune system during heart disease.
Hi, I'm Ammar Sajwan. I'm a pediatric pulmonologist. I joined this course to try to improve my efficiency in research and publishing, and I'm working on lung complications of sickle disease. So my next paper that I would like to publish is about the role of prostacyclin in treating acute chest syndrome and children with sickle cell disease.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kiera Hardy. I'm a graduate student at the University of South Alabama in the Micro and Immunology Department. I joined this course to learn more about translational science and how to become a translational scientist. The paper I would love to publish would be something along the lines of mechanisms that regulate virulence of Pseudomonas aeruginosa EXOU PLA22.
Good, thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Susan Burkett. I'm junior faculty in the pulmonary division here at UAB. I joined this course really to help myself design translational questions, research questions, as I make the K to R transition in the next couple of years. And I'm working on a stack of papers right now that are really trying to use novel rat models to ask questions relevant to cystic fibrosis.
Good morning, my name is Tania Webb. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Pediatric Nephrology here at UAB. I joined this course to learn more about research project design and biostats, and the paper I would love to publish is early detection of acute kidney injury in the cardiac ICU.
Hello, my name is Brandy Purnell. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Pediatric Hematology. I joined this course to increase my skill in study design and grantsmanship, and I am currently pursuing early life stressors and other social determinants of lung disease and sickle cell as well.
I'm Mary Lauren Scott, and I'm a associate professor in pediatric endocrinology. I'm here as Jessica's mentor. My paper that I love to publish obviously is hers here through this program, and also on numeracy skills in diabetic children, and also potentially in the future results from our high-risk type 1 diabetes clinic as far as improving or decreasing admission rates for kids with recurrent DKA.
Thanks.
I'm Stephen Benish. I'm one of the first-year fellows in neuroimmunology and MS here at UAB. I joined this course to help me try to build a career where I'm more involved in clinical trials and research to help patients more than just in the clinic. And I'd love to publish a paper on optimal strategies to improve quality of life in MS patients through targeted symptomatic treatment.
Thank you.
I'm Rebecca Ahrens. I'm assistant professor in the Division of Gynecological Oncology in the Department of OBGYN. I'm also getting my master's through the Clinical Translational Research Program through the MS-PH. I would say there's a lot of papers I'd like to publish, but I would say my goal would be to publish a positive result from my newly funded investigator-initiated trial in carcinosarcoma that combines targeted therapy with immunotherapy.
Hello everyone, my name is Muhammad Al-Qahtani. I'm second year PhD student from the Department of Rehab Science, and I'm working with Dr. Peter Hendricks from School of Public Health. And I joined this course to improve my research skills and to learn about different research aspects. And the paper I would love to publish will be related to factors associated with the e-cigarette use among adult pulmonary patients.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joanne Yara Fisher. I'm an assistant professor in the physical medicine and rehab at School of Medicine. So the reasons I'm here for mentoring Thomas Hoover, and the reason I encourage him to be at CCTS course is because I have benefited from CCTS all my career so far, so I wanted him to be here. And the paper he will publish will be related to brown adipose tissue and metabolic health and spinal cord injury. And the ultimate paper I want to publish in the future is utilizing all these data from my trainees to give a conceptual model for metabolic health and spinal cord injury.
And thank you for the promo.
Hi, my name is Renjay Shea. I'm a postdoc here at UAB in pulmonary. My reason for being here is I think I could benefit from the training in all the modules that are provided. So since I want to pursue a career in translational research, I think all of those modules will help me. And then the paper I'd love to publish would be on epithelial ion channel interactions in cystic fibrosis.
Hello, I'm Mariano Mora. I'm from Auburn University, and I am a clinical lecturer in equine medicine and emergency. And part of why I'm joining this course because I want to just learn more about research and study design. And the paper that I will like to publish sometime is the effect of metabolic syndrome in the equine endothelial colony forming cells.
So I want to give you a special thanks for being here. You're representing 9 of your colleagues at Auburn who we may or may not be able to connect with this morning. But if we can't do it this morning, we'll do it next time, just so we can move on in the program. But thank you for making the trip. We appreciate it.
Right, and also thank Kira Hardy for making the trip from Mobile.
Hi, I'm Claudia Reiner. I'm from Auburn University. I'm a clinical lecturer in equine emergency surgery. Reason for joining this course, I'd like to get some formal research training to be a more effective researcher. And paper I'd love to publish is the effect of pro-inflammatory cytokines on equine endothelial progenitor cells.
Hello, my name is Morgan Ellis. I'm a 4th year PhD student in the Department of Chemical Engineering at Auburn University, and I am part of UAB's TL1 fellowship program. And so this course was recommended to me for really working on taking the basic research aspects of my project in chemical engineering and translating it to the clinic. And a paper that I'd love to publish involves using biomaterials and human-induced pluripotent stem cells to study genetic congenital heart disease.
Great, thanks very much.
Good morning, my name is Harrison Walker. I'm Associate Professor of Neurology, and I'm here to support Nicole Bentley from Neurosurgery. My research involves understanding the therapeutic mechanism of deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's and other movement disorders.
So David, shall we?
Let's take one more stab at connecting with our online people. If this audio doesn't work, we'll work on this with you during the week. So Nicholas Rancilio, could you
Can you hear me?
attempt to tell us about yourself?
Can you hear me? Hello? I don't think you can.
Okay, I'm afraid we still aren't able to hear. So we'll, I think this is going to be a process for all of us. So we will work with you during the week to fix this problem. I'm sorry not to get you today.
So again, thank you to all of you for being here. I hope there were a couple of reasons for having the introductions, even though it's taken a fair amount of time. And one is to help us all realize we are in this course together, and that's one of the essential principles of translational science and team science. The second is to realize the diversity of interests that we have. I've heard some very fundamental projects, some very practical implementation science-oriented projects, and everything in between. And that's characteristic of translational science. It happens across the entire spectrum of discovery. A couple of comments I'd make just based on notes that I took during the introductions. I heard a number of you appropriately talk about learning new skills, perhaps study design, perhaps the mechanics of how to do translational research. I would encourage you to recognize that this is in part an introduction to sensitize you to what the opportunities are within translational science, but also to give you a way to get to the deeper resources that you might want to take advantage of, not only in the Birmingham hub of the CTSA, but also across the entire partner network. And we can talk about that throughout the course. The second is to make the point that sometimes people think translational science means a simply practical application or clinical application. And I don't think that's actually the case. It's really a much broader scope than that. It's not to say practical application isn't a good thing, but it's to say it's broader than that. The tent is actually quite large. One of our goals throughout the course is not only to talk about skills and some of the mechanics, but how to identify opportunities in research, how to begin to think as a translational scientist. So perhaps what I could do is move on, I think.
Click on the white. You'll be able to use the arrows.
Okay, you think? David? Okay, somehow that wasn't working. So, two ways to think about translation, and I just set up a potential dichotomy. One is when you ask Webster what translational science is, you can read this as well as I can. I think we, both those who are here face-to-face and those who are coming in virtually, you can see the screen. And Webster talks about practical application of scientific discoveries. That's fine. Frankly, I don't think that's the entire spectrum. And I much prefer the somewhat broader definition from the OED, which talks about translation and things translational is the movement of, in our case, discovery and knowledge from one place in the level of sophistication to another, perhaps from one model to another. Maybe it's all within a animal model space. It could even be within a preclinical space, going from something very basic then to cells, then to organisms, and to people. But I think our philosophy is one of how do we work together to move things along, and as we do that, it requires different perspectives and different skill sets to do that. That probably is one of the essential points of translational science. So what does NCATS, our NIH sponsor, say about all of this? Well, again, translational science spectrum represents each and every stage along the path from the biologic bases of health and disease all the way to practical application with interventions that improve the health of individuals and the public. Key point here, I think, is that this is not necessarily a linear path. Sometimes we can set forth a linear path, and some graphics that you can pull from the web or some of you reading sort of imply it's very straightforward. You work at the bench, then you work at the bedside, and then you go to the community, and it's all very nice and linear. And that's the way it works. I would suggest that that's probably a little bit of an oversimplification. It does speak to the point that as we move across that spectrum, there are opportunities for all of us to contribute. But I'd like to show you a map of the translational process for drug development. It was actually developed by NCATS and published in Nature Drug Discovery. So get ready. There it is. And I think that we can go through every box on this slide if you like, but I think the point is that there are many different elements, there are many different skills, and part of the opportunity for us is to bring these together so that as we need them, as we move things along, we can bring the skills to bear to accomplish the goals that we want. That might be the papers that you want to publish. And I think if you don't already realize that, you'll realize that as you pull together that paper, it's rarely a single individual sitting in a room thinking great thoughts, writing wonderful things, and then at the end the paper emerges. It's typically very much a team sport. I would say actually this image is an oversimplification because the whole thing wouldn't fit on one slide. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys recognize it's 2 slides to put in all of these elements. That's why it's great to have such a big group here, because we have many of these skills not only already in place and skills to be developed in this room to work on this translational spectrum. Okay, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about role models for translational investigators. And one of the points that I hope we keep coming back to throughout the course is, well, what does that mean to be a translational investigator? What kinds of questions did they ask? How did they think about their questions? Is there something that might be somewhat different? How did they approach their opportunities? What helped them to succeed? These are all simple questions. And what roadblocks did they encounter? So how could we approach that? Well, maybe is to see if we can articulate some of the characteristics of a successful translational investigator. I have a list here that's about to come up. Anyone have at least 1 or 2 suggestions for what might be on the list? Anyone brave enough to make a suggestion?
Collaborative.
Okay, thank you very much.
Could you repeat since I can't
So,
write fast enough with the mic?
I will repeat, David, for those who are coming in virtually. So one word that might be a characteristic of a successful translational investigator is collaborative. Anything else? How about another C word?
Critical.
What?
Critical.
Clinical might be one of them, representing a specific perspective and perhaps a particular skill set. Curious. Okay, so someone who's collaborative with a particular perspective, a disciplinary perspective, who is curious. So thank you for those. You'll see that not only do I think, but this actually comes from a book that was published just recently. It was actually a biography of someone, or I'll call it a biography. They talked about creativity, the ability to apply imagination to the intellect, and to your suggestion, curiosity, just relentless curiosity. So how might we think about those things? Some have written about curiosity, which may eventuate in something useful, but may not. But that curiosity is an outstanding characteristic of successful investigators. I don't know how many of you read the New York Times. At least a couple. So I actually pulled this quote from a New York Times piece last week, because sometimes they have something useful to say. And they referred to this particular reference. And I wanted to get this up here because that element of curiosity, that element of creativity, sometimes it's immediately obvious what is practical, but sometimes it's not. And part of the opportunity for the translational investigator is to see those things that may happen in a different space and be able to connect dots to see how that might come together. In fact, if you'd like, we can provide you with a PDF of Flexner's article from 1939. It's a bit wordy, but anyone who would like it, we have that if you'd like to read it. But of course, in the translational spectrum, there's also a counter tension, which is one of the urgency of actually doing things, that knowing is not enough, we must apply. Being willing is not enough, we must do. Anyone pop to mind who might have said this? It's attributable, I think probably reasonably fairly. So I realize there are probably a whole bunch of people to whom that might apply. This was actually attributed to Leonardo da Vinci. And so the concept of translation, of taking creative curiosity and then figuring out how to move that across the spectrum. In Leonardo's case, and I think Flexner was a little bit earlier in that translational pipeline, Leonardo was working at both ends. Okay, so any other characteristics? I'd like to mention a couple, if we can get this to work. One is implicitly, and I think really for the most successful translational investigators, explicitly, a span of disciplines. We've alluded to that already. Different kinds of skill sets that we can bring to bear on a problem. The ability of you as investigators to be able to talk productively with methodologists who might be talking about study design, perhaps with informaticists and big data scientists to know what they're doing, with various kinds of basic scientists, and then perhaps clinical application ultimately when that is the goal. So developing the capacity and the vocabulary to both think and act in a multilingual sense, I think is very important. Clearly the ability to observe, and I'd like to emphasize respect facts. I think facts actually sometimes are useful as we're making decisions. Here we're talking about science, but I think that's probably a pretty important characteristic. To the suggestion about collaboration, avoiding silos, realizing that it's important to be open to collaboration. And for this particular person that I have in mind for a successful translational investigator, this person made a lot of lists. It's in their notes. This is a historical individual. And one of the characteristics we've debated sometimes, sometimes there was delay in the procrastination, but that was also the time to be thinking very creatively and laterally. Anyone have a sense of whom I'm talking about? It's a big book by Walter Isaacson, if you're a fan of Walter Isaacson and his biographies. Recognize that guy? That's Leonardo. You know, I'm going to put in a promo. This is not for the CCTS. This is for reading the book. I read the last chapter. It's about 600 pages. That's the, not the last chapter. The whole book is 600 pages. Last chapter is 8 pages. I could handle that. It's really a fun read. You can, it's worth reading because you get a sense of the way he thought, the way he organized his thinking, his life, and I found that quite inspiring. So I'd like to introduce a couple of other concepts, and then we'll ask Joel Dodds to talk about how we pull this all together in terms of teams. And I'd like to propose a metaphor for translational science in the life science space. I think it's important for all of us to have a clear expertise. Some folks might call that a disciplinary science. Maybe that's cell biology, for example, or maybe that's neurology in a clinical space. But there are lots of different disciplines. And I'd like to liken that to an expertise which is very deep, but very focused. Perhaps a metaphor for that is something like a plant with a large taproot and maybe something like a carrot. But there's another way to think as well, and that is if we extend the plant metaphor to those kinds of plants that have a very different kind of root system. It's very broad. It reaches both to the left and the right. So they're looking to expand their horizons. And if we put those two together, what we have are plants that, and this I think is actually a tree, that is using both strategies. It's taking that strategy of the deep taproot, but it's also taking the strategy of a breadth, because breadth alone may not give you the full capacity as a translational investigator, but if we stay focused only in our discipline, then we're really not collaborative. We're not thinking laterally. For those of you who like images, I sort of look at that tree with the taproot and I see a T. And when I think of the T, I think of translational thinkers. People who not only have their disciplinary expertise, but also have the interest and the capacity to think laterally. And this is the way we can constantly renew our science. So some examples of where this has been successful. In engineering, we might have a disciplinary expertise in material science. And how has that led into translation has been very practical. For those of you who follow these things, you know that the Boeing's Dreamliner involves new materials that had never been used in airplanes before. Airbus, I think, has copied them now. But it's an important point that Boeing was extremely innovative in the design and implementation of their Dreamliner. And in chip fabrication, at least if you watch the ads on broadcast TV, it must be there's something very special in the iPhone X or the iPhone 10. Maybe yes, maybe no, but that's what broadcast TV says. And the point is, we wouldn't have it if we didn't have the people who are working on the design of chips and the fabrication of those chips. It took a very creative translational thinker, some people would call him Steve Jobs, to take that technology and move it into something that somehow we all seem to think we can't do without. How about in life science? I think there are many, many examples there, but I'd like to point to two because they end up being very practical in the clinical space. One is all the basic science work in inflammatory cytokines, and I know there's some interest in inflammation and life science within the room. And that's been taken through a translational process to what's now a very mainstream therapy in various kinds of autoimmune diseases, and that's the blockade of some of those cytokines. In this case, it's called tumor necrosis factor. If you're J&J and you have Remicade, you're pretty happy about the effects and the success of that translation. And for those who are working in a different clinical space, and Beck, I think I heard you mention this, in terms of immunotherapy, which really means for most folks checkpoint inhibitors right now, there's some very fundamental work that goes back decades that has now gone through a process of thinking about how might this apply, and that's led to checkpoint inhibitor therapy for cancer. That has been recognized not only in the practical pharmacologic space, but a committee that sits in Oslo, Norway, has also recognized that as the award for medicine this year. So there's lots of opportunity here. So what's the mission of the CCTS? We talked a little bit about promoting, I hope, throughout, not just today, but throughout the term of this course, to get us to be thinking in terms of how can we look to the left and right of our disciplines and identify opportunities for advancing our understanding and translation. Things that might happen locally, really nationally. How do we think about the opioid crisis? Is this an issue of pharmacology? Is this an issue of sociology and everything in between? How can we think about that? Perhaps, and I know some of you are in nutrition science, how should we be thinking about obesity and some of the consequences of that, including non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? Some of that might be very molecular, some of it might be sociologic, and again, everything in between. How might we think about stroke? All of these are issues which are major translational challenges for the CCTS. And why bring that up? Because it's addressing these challenges. It's the mission of the CCTS. Now, a couple of comments, then I'm going to turn the podium over to David. Last year, we thought, well, look, teams are really important to doing this. So we would create a couple of teams, we'd break everyone up. We'd ask you to think about some translational challenges, to develop some approaches to that. It all sounded great. We wanted you not only to have activities that you did on your own, but those, as you can see from this, that were team-oriented. Turns out we had a little trouble getting traction with that, so we're going to do it a little bit differently this year. And that leads to this slide, which is, David, what do we want to do? What are we going to propose to you guys for 2019? Not only within the whole frame of this course, but with Joel Dobbs, who's joining us from the School of Business. So I just want to make sure you guys realize you need to stay connected, not only through the course, but through multiple venues, including the website.
Thanks, Bob. So just for all of you, recognize that we will make all the slides available online. We'll make sure you know how to get to them. So anything that's printed on here, you can get access to easily. So in terms of the team focus of the course, so we really jumped in with high expectations last year, and a number of logistical issues came up that kept us from succeeding. So we're really going to take sort of some baby steps, and this is using the course as a laboratory to figure out what kind of activities really are useful and helpful. Dr. Dobbs, who's going to speak next, at some point in the presentations he gives during this course, we'll talk a little bit about the size of optimal teams. In the scientific environment, that's probably bigger than what we can pull off with a group of people who are spread all across the state, some into all the way down to Mobile. And so we're going to break you up into small teams of 4. I'll be sending you a list of those soon, and there will be 2 major things that you'll do. One is that we're going to take advantage of an educational platform that some of you, if you're in the School of Nursing, may have used already, called Kaizen. It's a Japanese word that means continuous improvement. It's a software tool to basically reinforce academic material. So not this week, but starting after the next session, we'll publish a small group of questions that are based on the previous week's material that you'll access through your computers. We're working on developing this into a mobile app that may be ready before the course is, we hope, halfway done, so you can do it on your cell phone as well. But and each team will be competing with each other for getting the most answers right. This is going to take, I would guess, 3 to 5 minutes of your time, and it's just a chance to think back about what was talked about during the course the several days before, and make sure that you got some of the key messages from the session into your knowledge base. So we'll provide instructions of how to do it. It's really simple, and it shouldn't be burdensome at all, and it's just a chance to begin to work as a team. The other thing is, as we approach writing the abstract, I'd like each group of 4 to serve as peer critiquers of your abstracts before they get sent into the course for our evaluation and feedback. So we will give, the group of 4 will have the information to contact each other easily. I'm anticipating that you'll want to do this just by email, but you can do it by phone call. We'll provide you with information about freeconferencecall.com, which is a very easy system to use if you want to all call in at the same time to provide each other feedback. And as I said before, one of the things we hope you'll learn from this is basic skills on how to critique each other's work and provide really collegial feedback in a positive way that helps us all to be more effective scientists. And we'll go on and use those skills later in the actual oral feedback for the oral presentations that'll happen in June. So that's really the limit of what we're going to do for the team activities this time. If you have ideas of ways to expand what your team 4 is, I'm going to try to group you in what I think are complementing disciplines. And you may find that as you talk about your abstracts that you have opportunities to really help each other think about your science and develop your thoughts a little more effectively. Okay, so I want to thank Dr. Kimberly for his introduction, and we'll take about a 5-minute break so everybody can use the restroom, get some water if you need, and there's still food in the room back here if you didn't get a chance. Let me remind you, when you were coming in, please make sure you swipe your badge on the little device by the door so that you're registered. This is how we will make sure that you've done your 80% of your participation, so you get your valuable paper certificate at the end. And thanks very much. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes for back to course. Or yeah, if you don't have a UAB badge, Jean has the paper sign-in list. Okay, thanks. Sure.
I saw that letter with my Jennifer very diplomatic said, here is the letter. It has my signature.
Okay. Tie better. I won't. Good deal. So when do you need me to stop? Okay. No, I'll leave some time if people have questions. Good deal. So we have people remote as well. Okay. Good deal. Yep, good deal. I've got one. What do I do with it? Do you have it? Yes, you do have it. I was going to say, yeah. Getting over a cold that I had like back before Christmas, and I'm left with this residual cough that's just driving me nuts. And it won't go away. Yeah. So let's see, do we need to load my slides here? Okay. Yep. Okay.
It doesn't work.
Yep. All right. We'll figure it out. Morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. I wouldn't miss it. Yeah. Yeah. We got a little bit of coffee here.
Okay, so we'll get ready to start again. So a couple of things. First, thanks to all the mentors who came today. I hope that the participants in the course will make sure that their mentors know that they're welcome to come anytime. They're also welcome to access any of the online materials. And I hope that you will keep them abreast of what you're learning from the course so that if you've learned something that they think is useful for the entire group that you work with, that you'll have a chance to give a little report to your own teams that you work with about what you've learned. Otherwise, I also just want to reiterate that Jean Lambert and I are the main contact people for the course. We're happy to talk to you at any point about things that are not working well for you for the course or any issues that you would like to have expanded on. Our group of faculty are incredibly skilled. One of the real goals of this course is for you to get familiar with some of the faces around the campus and actually across our partner network who are experts in areas that may be really useful to you so that you can go to them when you need more in-depth consultation. We're going to make sure that you learn about resources that the CCTS has that are shareable so that you can take advantage of those as well. Okay, so the next part of the presentation will be by Dr. Joel Dobbs. Dr. Dobbs has the august title of Executive in Residence in the School of Business, the Collette School of Business. If you haven't been down to see the new Collette School, it's a beautiful new building just beyond the Student Center as you get close to I-65. And I encourage you to take a look at that end of campus as well. Dr. Dobbs has training in pharmacology and pharmacy. He worked for many years in the pharmaceutical industry, and I think it's there that he really got his interest in how teams operate, and what the qualities of very effective teams are, what dysfunctional teams look like, kinds of things you can do to help try to turn a dysfunctional team into a highly effective team. So today he has modest aims to give us an introduction to some of these concepts. He'll be coming back and talking later in the course for a full session to give you more in-depth of details. But to start to think about, some of you may not have even realized that you are already probably parts of teams, even if you think you and your mentor work alone on something. No doubt if you start thinking translationally, you'll realize what came before, what goes after, and who you depend on to make your work be effective. And so we're trying to sensitize you to some of those issues. For the online participants, we're really sorry that we weren't able to work out the audio problems. We will be contacting at least several of you during the week to try to practice this offline so that we get the technological glitches worked out. We're just switching from between two different platforms for our web-based communication, and we will get this worked out. So apologies for keeping you in the quiet this week, but we look forward to your participation later. Okay, so Dr. Davies,
I'm it.
thank you very much.
Okay, good morning. Two things off the bat. First of all, before the holidays, I came down with a cold that has left me with a residual cough. I am fine. I'm not contagious, and if I have a coughing fit, have to take a drink of water or put a cough drop in my mouth, please bear with me. Hopefully, I'll be okay. I had to teach last night late, and by the time I got through with my class, my MBA level class that I'm teaching in the evenings, my voice was completely shot. So, but it's early, and so hopefully I'm fresh. Second thing is I'll add my secondary endorsement to Bob's discussion of Isaacson's biography of Leonardo da Vinci. I did read the whole thing. The book is imposing in its weight. It is printed because they include a lot of Da Vinci illustrations and paintings and a lot of Da Vinci's work. It's printed on very thick, high-quality paper, and the book weighs a ton. It is the heaviest physical book I think I have ever owned for that size. Tremendously dense. It is a fascinating read. And as Bob says, the thing that you come away from with that is the key to Da Vinci's genius is he was insatiably curious. And you see that in everything throughout his life. Which serves most of us very well to be curious. Just a little bit of background on who this guy is talking to you. David gave you a little bit of an introduction. I'm not a typical academic. In fact, I'm really not one at all. I'm a retired, or as my wife says, a guy who failed retirement twice, pharmaceutical executive. I spent 35 years in the pharma and biotech business. Many years ago, I got asked by a group of folks in North Carolina if I would come help them out and with a company that they were trying to get started up there. And so my wife and I moved up to North Carolina. I joined a group of probably more people in this room right now than were in the company at the time. I joined in a rented building in Chapel Hill and spent the next 14 years with that company. That company today is GlaxoSmithKline. I got to have the privilege of being part of the team that started Glaxo in the United States. Was part of the team that did the hostile takeover of Wellcome in 1995 and did the integration of the research and development operation there, and then was subsequently recruited away and spent the latter part of my career primarily starting and fixing businesses all over the world. So I ran a global business for Glaxo and for Schering-Plough Corporation later. Lived in Europe for a while when I was working for Glaxo. Started several businesses in India, interesting experience. Worked for Japanese companies, so spent a lot of time in Tokyo. But most of my career has been involved in either starting businesses, fixing businesses, or running businesses all over the world. One of the things that sort of came in vogue really in the early 90s with the publication of two things. One is Katzenbach's Wisdom of Teams, and then a number of other books around that time is the whole idea of teamwork originally sort of became a business fad. And then it as most fads do, they sort of go from a lot of hype down to reality. And in the pharmaceutical industry for many years, we were so profitable that you really didn't have to be efficient. We just threw money and people at problems. We didn't have to be efficient in terms of automation. You really didn't have to be that innovative. If you had really good patent lawyers and good marketing departments, you could do all kind of clever stuff, and you could milk a cash cow drug to death. And so we really didn't have to be efficient. And that began changing in the 90s, and it's changed dramatically. The industry that exists today is unrecognizable from the one that I joined in the early 1980s. Completely unrecognizable. And so one of the things the industry figured out that they had to do in order to get more efficient is they had to focus on multidisciplinary teamwork. The way it used to work is you'd have a bunch of discovery scientists that found a target that they liked. They'd screen against it. They'd find a lead compound. They'd do some toxicology on it. If it didn't kill anything, they'd move it forward. And at some point, they would throw it over the wall to clinical research, who would try to figure out, can we do studies on this thing and figure out what to do with it in humans? They'd figure something out eventually, find a market for it, throw it over the wall to sales and marketing, and then they would try to sell the thing. And because the margins were so high and the industry was so profitable, that worked great. Until really the end of the 1980s and early 90s, when we began discovering I worked for a guy named Cecil Pickett. I don't know if you know Cecil, one of the most brilliant scientists I've ever worked for. He was, when I worked for Shearing Plow Corporation, he was my boss, was the president of Shearing Plow Research Institute. And we were going through a number of transitions. We were changing a lot of things within the work that we were doing, how we worked. And Cecil and I were having a conversation one day over lunch, and I asked him, I said, Cecil, why is it that everything seems to have gotten so much more complicated and so much more expensive? And Cecil thought for a few minutes, and he said, Joel, I think it's because we've done all the easy stuff. And that's what's happening sort of in science, is you've done the easy stuff. The stuff you do now is hard. Drug discovery is hard. Bob showed those two graphs earlier, and he said it was a simplification. He's right. It is very much of an oversimplification. Complicated stuff, because used to be you're dealing with small molecules. You're giving people something that basically treats symptoms of the disease. You may or may not know exactly how it works, but if it worked, it worked. And if it wasn't toxic, you were generally okay. Today, in order to generate a product that you can be paid for, you gotta really be able to generate a tremendous value proposition. And that value proposition, in order to get there, you're dealing with fundamental mechanisms in the body, in the production of proteins, in mechanisms of disease that have a lot of unintended consequences. And so the bottom line is science has gotten a lot more complicated. The business of science has gotten a lot more complicated. And so you can't operate in kind of individual silos and throw things over the wall to people the way you used to do. When I do, in addition to teaching here at UAB, and I teach in the MBA program and the undergraduate program, I teach in the engineering school, and I teach leadership, innovation, entrepreneurship, strategy. And one of the things that, when we work on teamwork with folks, I also run a consulting business. So I do a fair amount of work with companies on strategy and teamwork. And usually what they're trying to do when they're looking to be have more efficient teams is they're looking to be more innovative. That's the end goal. It's not just the idea of getting people to work together for the sake of getting them to work together and have harmony and all that kind of stuff, because if you're effective as a team, you really won't always have harmony. But what they're trying to do is become more innovative. And you get innovation when you get disparate ideas that collide, and you get what my British colleagues used to refer to as vigorous debate. You get discussion around ideas, and you're able to discuss those ideas without making them personal. That's one of the things as we get into teamwork, and I'll show you just a little bit here in a second about kind of how we think about effective and ineffective teams, and just a little bit about what that looks like in practice. Now, what is a team? This comes from Katzenbach and Smith's sort of landmark book, The Discipline of Teams. And I've highlighted the parts in this definition that are key. A team is a small number of people with complementary skills committed to a common purpose, a set of performance goals, and an approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. Now let's dissect that a minute, because it's important to understand what I'm talking about. Let's take an example of football. We're in Alabama, everybody understands football. You got different skills on a football team. A 300-pound offensive lineman is not going to be effective as a wide receiver. You need a wide receiver to be somebody who's fast. They got big hands. They got good hand-eye coordination. They may or may not have a lot of physical strength. But an offensive lineman doesn't need those things. You need somebody who's going to protect the quarterback, who's going to block for runners. You need somebody who's big, who's strong. They may be quick, but they're not necessarily that fast, but they're able to do a different job, and those things are complementary. You can't throw the ball if you've got a defensive lineman in your face. And so those are complementary skills. Small number of people, Bob was talking earlier about the size of teams and so forth. One of the things I have found is you get above a dozen people and you're pretty much sucking wind. Optimal team sizes are usually smaller than that. It kind of depends on what you're trying to do. You know, 5 or 6 people can be fairly optimal. You get above a dozen people, it gets complicated. I'm always amused when people, particularly in government, put together a team that's got 36 people on it. You don't have a team. You've got an audience. That just doesn't work. So small number of people, complementary skills, people who, if everybody's the same, then you're not going to have an effective team. Throughout the course of my corporate career, we would put together a lot of teams to do projects of one form or another. So it could be anything from building a new building to developing a new drug to developing a piece of software or whatever. And I had a mentor of mine that one of the things he was a real stickler about was being very thoughtful about how you assembled your project teams. And he had a saying. His saying was, availability is not a skill. You don't want somebody just because they've got the time. You want people with the skills that you need, which means that when you put a team together, you have to think about what is it we're trying to accomplish and what are the skills that we need to do that. And can we assemble a team of people that have the skills that we need to do that? If everybody is an offensive lineman, you're not going to have a very good football team. You got to have people with complementary skills. Small number of people, complementary skills, committed to a common purpose. Why are you doing what you are doing? Right? If you don't know what the end game is, if you don't know what success looks like, then why are you there? And this is one of the things that I think sometimes teams, particularly in academic environments, struggle with, is figuring out what is our common purpose? What is our goal? What does success look like at the end? And that's one of those kind of things that you need to, as you work together in teams, one of the things you need to think about is what is the end? What is the goal that we're trying to accomplish? A set of performance goals. What is that going to look like if we're successful? What are each of us agreeing to do? What is the approach that we're taking? And finally, the ability to hold each other mutually accountable. And this is one of the places that gets most difficult for teams is having the ability to basically be able to tactfully and thoughtfully and lovingly call out team members who aren't doing their job, who aren't pulling their weight. And take responsibility when you're not. Coming back to the football analogy, how many times you see a quarterback throw a pass, throw an interception? Watch the national championship very early on. You saw one throw an interception. What did he do? He said, it's on me. That was he took responsibility for his action. Good teams do that and hold themselves mutually accountable. Now, the difference between teams and teamwork, believe it or not, when we first started, when I was in Glaxo in the early 90s, we had a big initiative to try to generate more effective teamwork among our researchers. And interestingly, one of the things that people struggled with at that time was this idea of the difference between teams and teamwork. So definition of each. A team, I've just given you the definition of. Teamwork is a cultural attribute of an organization. It is the ability of people, the process to work together to accomplish common goals. You can have teamwork in an organization without being a part of a team, but you cannot have an effective team without having teamwork. And so when I get called into organizations to help them work on teamwork, we start with teamwork as a discipline in order to enable them to have more effective teams. If teamwork isn't a cultural attribute of the organization, no matter what you do, you're not going to have effective teams. And so you have to work through this process of helping people understand how to learn to work together. And we do all kind of things with teamwork. Some of you may have participated in some of these kind of ropes course retreat type things where you climb ropes, you jump off of things. I did a leadership program up in Vermont a few years ago for a company up in the Northeast. And we went to a beautiful place in the mountains called the Equinox. And we did falconry as a way of looking at teamwork and his combination of teamwork and leadership and the interaction with the falconer, with the bird, and all those kind of things, which is a fascinating science in of itself. By the way, the one thing you need to know is the bird is always hungry. The bird isn't hungry, it's gone. You see the eagle before the Auburn games fly down, that bird is hungry. You're just lucky it doesn't get somebody's hot dog in the audience and goes for the piece of chicken that the falconer is holding in midfield. So frequently we use those kind of things to teach people teamwork. Why do you do that? Because the way you behave in those situations is the same way you're going to behave at work. And so what we do is take people out of the office, put them in situations where they're doing certain things, certain types of activities. And what the facilitator does is then debriefs on that activity. Here's what you did. How does that play out back at the office or back at the laboratory or whatever? And so that's kind of how you teach teamwork. But it requires it requires a desire to learn and desire to change. number one. And secondly, it requires a certain amount of self-awareness and self-control and self-discipline to be able to change your behavior and to be able to recognize and be able to accept feedback from your teammates. Now, all teams go through this kind of basic mechanism. Some of you have probably seen this before, of how there's these 4 stages. When you first get together, it's forming. You get to know each other. You know, everybody's kind of happy. It's all kind of great. Storming is when you actually start trying to do work, and you begin to discover, you know, the conflicts, the role confusions, all those kind of things. Norming is when you begin to sort out what your role is, how you're going to work together, what the objectives are, and then ultimately performing. And adjourning is sort of when you accomplish your task and you kind of celebrate the success at the end. Another way of looking at it is these are sort of the steps and how they actually sort of play out in real life. And one of the things that will happen in all of in almost any team that you join, there's always, we used to see this with project teams. You have a project kickoff meeting, right? And so everybody's, you know, if it's a complex project, an engineering project or something, you've probably got a project charter that everybody agrees to, and that's kind of the rules about how you're going to operate and everything. Everybody introduces everybody, everybody's excited, all that kind of stuff. You start moving forward, and then a few things start going wrong. Suddenly people start pointing fingers, all kind of problems. And everything is going to, all projects, all teams are going to experience that kind of adversity early on. It may be over role confusion. It may be over complications that you encounter as you're getting into this. But what happens is you generate tension. And the key to success is learning to work through that tension so that you ultimately begin to normalize and then are able to perform effectively as a team. And so understanding that life cycle is critical, because otherwise what happens is you get in the storming stage and everybody either quits or you make everybody mad and you all sulk and nobody gets anything done. Anybody know who Rosabeth Moss Kanter is? Ever heard of her? She's a very well-known professor in the Harvard Business School. Brilliant lady. And she has something that she calls Kanter's Law. And Kanter's Law basically says this. It says everything looks like a failure in the middle. And you think about that. It does. Everything looks like a failure in the middle. Every project, every endeavor is like a 3-act play, right? The first act is happy. Everybody, you know, gets along. Think of the first 3 Star Wars movies, right? They were classic 3-act play. First one, we meet the characters. We meet Obi-Wan Kenobi, all that kind of stuff. But the first act ends on a downer. Right? Princess Leia has been kidnapped by a giant slug, all this kind of stuff. And so then you get into the second one, which is really kind of a dark movie. The second act of plays are all the dilemma. And this is when everything kind of goes bad, right? And so Princess Leia gets kidnapped, you know, Han Solo gets frozen into this crazy stuff, whatever that is, and it ends on a real downer. And then the third act is the resolution. And of course, the third Star Wars movie ends with the Ewoks, you know, the things that were obviously invented by the people in the gift store, little cute fuzzy things, and everybody's kind of dancing under the moonlight of some distant planet at the end, and everybody's happy. Projects work the same way. You start out easy, you go through this storming stage, and it's the second act of a play. And the key that you've got to do is you got to persevere through the second act. You got to persevere through the storm. And so you have to learn how to do that. So one of the ways that we talk about effective teams, there's a wonderful book by Patrick Lencioni called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And I use this in the business school here. I use it in my consulting work. I think I used it during my corporate career. I did in several of the acquisitions I was involved with. I inherited groups of people who hated each other, and we had to try to figure out how to make them work together. And we used this model, and we used an assessment that went along with it. And basically what Lencioni says is that ineffective teams, and by converse, effective teams, if you turn it around the other way, operate on somewhat of a Maslowian-like hierarchy. So if you start at the bottom, the biggest fundamental issue is absence of trust. If you don't trust each other, you got problems. In an acquisition, when you're combining 2 companies together, people from multiple divisions of different companies together, one of the biggest things you deal with is a lack of trust. And so without that, you get nothing else. Fear of conflict. the inability to have constructive, vigorous debate, to be able to talk through issues without making them personal. Lack of commitment, the lack of cohesive commitment on the part of the team to the project they're working on and the goals, avoidance of accountability, not being willing to hold each other accountable and be held accountable for doing their job, and all that leads to inattention to results, so nothing happens. And so when you kind of look at how you confront that, and we'll go into this later in a lot more detail, but building trust requires vulnerability. It requires the ability to say, I don't know if I don't know. It's the ability to ask for help and the willingness to ask for help. Fear of conflict, candid debate. I have I teach an MBA level course on leading innovation, and we spend a class looking at the characteristics of innovative teams in a sort of life cycle of things that innovative teams are able to do. And at the core of that is this ability to have constructive, vigorous debate and to be able to resolve that debate and move forward and take action, right? It's not just enough to have a good argument. You got to be able to have the ability to resolve that argument and then convert that resolution into a coherent action. That's where you get creativity. That's where you get the kind of real breakthrough innovation that comes from a lot of disparate ideas coming together. Lack of commitment. Commitment follows heavy conflict. Commitment, if you have worked through something, you've had serious discussions, and you really have come to a good conclusion, then you'll get commitment. When in my former life as an executive, we would sometimes debate very significant issues, sometimes things involving literally hundreds of millions of dollars potentially. And we'd finish the discussion, and I would go around the room to each member of the team and look them in the eye and say, are you with us on this? Are you with us on this? I wanted everybody to declare before the team, yes. Now, it may have been a compromise. This may have not been exactly what I wanted, but the time we leave the room, I wanted to make sure that everybody was on board, because the thing I didn't want somebody walking out that agreed to it and saying, we agreed to that, but I didn't want to do that. Now, in the corporate world, we had a recourse to that. It's called a nice lady from human resources and a security guard shows up and escorts you out of the building. I've literally fired people before because they made a commitment in a meeting and then walked out of the meeting and kind of stabbed their teammates in the back. And I'd call them in. We'd have what we call a come to Jesus meeting. We'd have a serious discussion. I'm saying, I'm sorry, we don't have a place for you anymore, and you're gone. They can't do that in academia. But what happens is you don't have to do that but one or two times. One of my former bosses used to call it a public execution. He said once or twice, when people see you mean business, it makes a difference. So one of the things you have to think about in the context of an academic research environment, what are the levers that you can pull to demonstrate that you mean business? How do you, what is it you do to get people's attention that say, no, we're serious about this? And I don't know what those are, but you have to be able to forgive the metaphor here, but it's, again, a number of former boss of mine used to say, you have to be willing to shoot the deserters. In other words, you have to be willing to deal with people who are not willing to be part of what you're trying to do. Accountability. Accountability requires commitment. And so getting people to buy in, so the asking everybody, go on the record for me, tell me, are you in with this? Are you okay? And then dealing with results is principally things that are measurable. How are you going to measure success with what you're doing? How do you know you're being successful? How do you know that you're accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish? What are the things that you can, the metrics that you can look at that say, yes, we're doing this effectively? We did a lot of stuff in the manufacturing operations with Lean Sigma, particularly in the last company that I worked for. And so one of the things that you're organized around teams, production teams. There's a lot of quality metrics. And so you walk around the production floor in the plants, and what you see are all these graphs that in things that tell you, how many defects did we have? What are the reject rate? In pharmaceuticals, you have a quality control processes and quality assurance processes. And so you do all these things during the manufacturing process to look at efficiency. And then at the end, you do these things that are called retention samples, where you take sample of drugs, you go back and test them. Do the tablets really contain what they're supposed to contain? The darn things really dissolve the way they're supposed to dissolve. So in other words, you're testing after the fact. And so you have those kind of things that you could measure. So the thing to think about is, what can you measure? How do you know that you're making progress? How do you know that you're making success? And those things are going to be different depending on the project you're working on. In the pharma business, for years and years, every Monday, we would have a meeting where we would review the status of a number of our projects. And we had what is called a stage gate process. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but a stage gate is basically a hurdle that a project must pass in order to go to the next level. So in other words, we didn't fund a project, we funded segments of a project, right? So you get the money to do this, and then we review it. Did that work? If it didn't work, why did it not work? And do we need to continue? Do we need to persevere? Or do we need to pivot to something else? Or do we need to kill the project? And depending on where it is and the cost benefit of that, we would make decisions. Do we go to the next level? Do we fund it to the next level? Or do we make a decision to kill the project? Particularly in the more problems you run into later, the more expensive the solutions become. You don't want to lose something in phase 3. You wind up writing off $800 or $900 million. So you try to shift all the risk forward. And the way you do that is you're looking very, very carefully at each step and measuring your progress. So one of the things you to think about is depending on the projects you're working on, are there hurdles that you need to pass? Are there decision points where you need to look at those and say, you know, if we don't get this answer at this point, then what do we do? And in a team science type environment, there are multiple perspectives and multiple stakeholders depending on what those hurdles and milestones are. And being able as a team to be completely on board with those and being able to agree that if this doesn't work out, yes, this may be an interesting problem, but it may not be the best avenue to pursue. Does that make sense? You with me? Okay. Now, characteristics of highly performing teams. We've kind of touched on a lot of those, but I want to come back and kind of reiterate those. Common purpose, most important thing. You got to know why you're there. If you don't know why you're there, you're just having a get-together. Clearly defined roles. Who does what? That is one of the things that if you've got ambiguity around roles, you get conflict with that. So being clear about who does what. Accepted leadership. Who is in charge? Now, one of the things I frequently do in some of the training programs is I show a picture of a school of fish. And I usually do this toward the end of the presentation. It's usually the last slide. And one of the things that I say is that once you get to the point of a really effective team, it operates like a school of fish. Now, if you've ever been to an aquarium somewhere or something and watched a school of fish swimming around, do you see any fish pointing his or her fin and saying, let's go this way, guys, let's go that way? No, they move in unison. They respond to some type of external stimuli, and they all move in unison. You can't tell who's leading. And in a really effective team, everybody's a leader. So you can't really tell who's leading. But in order to get there, you have to have, somebody has to set the example. You have to have leadership, and then that leadership develops other team members into leaders. And once you get a high-performing team, you have a lot of leaders. Come back to the football analogy. What do coaches frequently talk about when they have really good teams? They say we have a lot of leaders on the team. And good teams operate so efficiently that you really can't tell who's leading. It's like a school of fish. Effective processes, effective ways of doing how you do what you do, whatever that is. Solid relationships. You don't necessarily have to like each other, but you do have to learn to work with each other and respect each other. Solid relationships are built on trust and respect first and foremost, and likability is really third. And finally, excellent communications, talking to each other. Being clear in your communications, being unambiguous, keeping people in the loop so that everybody knows what's going on. If you're part of a team and you don't know what's going on, or there's side conversations that you're not involved in, you're going to feel slighted, and you're not going to feel like you're a part of that team. And as a result, your commitment and your trust level is going to go down. So finally, the big question, if you're going to be a team, what are the things that you have to do? One is you got to keep your egos in check. This is one of the hardest things in a lot of environments is to kind of check your ego at the door. This was one of the big things in the corporate world that we would hammer into people is you leave your title at the door. Everybody treats everybody with respect, but you don't let your ego get in the way. Because what happens if you do that? If you're in a hierarchical environment, and the most senior, you don't want to be in a position where the most senior person in the room makes all the decisions, or every time the most senior person says something, everybody nods their head in agreement, whether they do or not. That's not, you're not getting commitment, right? And so what you have to do is avoid that. And that means if you're the most senior person in the room, then what you've got to do is you've got to set the example. You've got to ask people for their thoughts. You've got to listen to people. You've got to acknowledge people. You've got to create an environment where everybody feels free to speak. Everybody feels like they're heard. We've already talked about this, confronting problems, behavioral problems, performance problems, and putting the success of the team and the organization above your own personal success. The old Three Musketeers thing, all for one, one for all. And those are the characteristics of successful teams. Now that's kind of a 90-mile-an-hour overview of remedial overview of teams and teamwork. I want to take a minute or two here because I've got a little bit of time if there's any questions or anything at this point. Yes, sir.
Joe, one of the points you've made that in terms of constructive conflict, it's important to focus on issues, not personalities.
Yeah.
Sometimes in an academic environment, that balance is a little bit different. It's focused on the people.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, have you had any suggestions for all of us, or each of us, as to how we might approach a situation when we see that the balance is less on the issue and more on perhaps the person?
Yeah.
What are the kinds of things we ought to be thinking about?
Yeah, the biggest thing is taking the focus in a discussion like that. Can you get the focus back on the problem, first of all, or the issue that you're trying to solve? A lot of times what happens is it becomes, a lot of times the way things become personal, I do this and, I'll kind of free up myself in case I do this at a later session with you. But one of the things I do when I teach teamwork is I'll have two people come up in front of the audience, and I'll tell one of them, come up with a dumb idea. It can be anything. Just come up with a dumb idea and tell us what it is. And the person will come up with something stupid. And amazingly, sometimes I have people who can't think of a dumb idea. You wonder. And I tell the other person, critique that idea. You know what the first thing they always say is? I don't like your idea because. What have I now done? I've made it personal, right? And so one of the things is learning to critique ideas without making it personal. And so when you have one person who's dominating and maybe pulling the authority rank, one of the questions one of the approaches is, can you, without personalizing it, constructively ask questions or raise issues about the problem itself, so that what you're doing is you're not getting at that person's personality. In other words, trying to redirect the conversation back to the problem itself. Big egos are not the purview of academia alone. I can assure you, I've worked with a number of people in industry who have gargantuan egos, and the kind of people as my mother used to say, you can't tell them nothing. And you all will encounter those. I think the other thing is whether or not there are people on the team that have a relationship with the person that offline they can talk to them and say, and it depends on the relationship you have with them. It may be very direct. It's not helpful, when you pull rank on folks, or it may be less direct, that it would be really constructive if we could stay focused on the problem or stay focused on the issue that we're trying to debate. And maybe reassure them that your authority is not being called into question. We're just all trying to come up with the best solution. And again, people react differently to different situations, all kind of different things. A lot of times people don't realize they're doing what they're doing. And it's not unusual for someone when you kind of privately have a discussion with them about something they're doing, they don't realize they're doing it. And it's always an interesting conversation when that happens.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Any last questions or comments? Okay, well, thanks very much. I want to thank Dr. Kimberly and Dr. Dobbs for stimulating morning, and glad to have you all here. Next week, we'll start with the introduction to phase 1 and 2 clinical trials and the biostatistical key points that go along with them. And look forward to seeing you again.